and welcome to the show, Living with Climate Change. Today's show is called Facing Climate Collapse with Rumi. And Rumi is a Sufi mystic poet from the 13th century. And he's very famous and very well loved. And we are going to look at one of his incredible poems today and relate it to our situation with climate change. So that's going to be the focus of the show. And first, I want to just talk about some general comments about climate change and policy and what's going on. And then I want to talk about the ways that people deal with climate change, and that I hope that leads to maybe you will agree with me that facing our lives and climate change and our own mortality from a very spiritual way is the best way and the most peaceful and comforting and effective way of facing this. So we're going to look at that, and then we will go into this incredible poem. So I hope, please stay with me. It's a wonderful lesson today, I think, that we will have. So I've been watching, I study climate change every day, and, we live in this information age, and there is so much information that we have access to on the internet, along with libraries and all the rest. And I'm sure you know that we find a lot of different views and opinions, and it's hard for us to sort all of it out. I've been studying the Green New Deal in the United States, something that's very interesting, and this Marianne Williamson is running for president, which is, you just never know. Of course, I know of her from, she kind of popularized A Course in Miracles. And then other things I've been studying about in the developing world, problems. And so we have so much going on in the world that obviously none of us can follow it all and know about all of it. And just as you study science, and it just gets, there is so much, the world is so complex in science, and it's really hard to kind of get a grasp on it. That's why, when people do PhDs, it's so focused, topics are just so focused. And a lot of scientists are they're incredibly focused on one thing, and but it's hard to get sort it all out, is my point, and get the big picture of what's going on in the world and how we deal with it, and policy and how we can help change it and everything else. So I hope that we're going to look at that more and more. That's just an observation. I don't really have any I think, and well, that leads to I think that you're going to see with the more you read and you about the scientific reports and everything else that you get a very bleak view of our future. So today we are going to kind of look at the worst case scenario and how we can deal with it. We'll call it climate collapse. And you know, this poem in a way is about death, and that's a taboo subject, and it's thought of as a horrible thing. And we're going to look at that. And I watched a lecture on someone, I think it was an engineer or scientist, and I watched the whole thing, and their final word was, it is the end of life as we know it. And they stated that when you wake up to this, you will never be the same, and meaning it will be a heavy burden on you. But they gave no way to deal with it. So we're going to try to deal with it. And that statement is, I'm not sure that I agree with that. Well, maybe I do, but is that a bad thing? Well, let's look at that. So death, yes. You know the story of the Buddha, that he was, well, what affected him, that he was kind of a sheltered life as a king, and they took him out into the streets, and he saw somebody that was dead, and he didn't know that you died. So when he found out you died, that is what led the Buddha on his journey. And I think that's interesting. This situation we're in with climate change is quite an interesting situation. And I think we can learn a lot about ourselves in this. You know, really we're looking at the death of the planet and our civilization. That's what we're afraid of. And it's just a bigger version of our own deaths, if you think about it. And so we're going to talk about that. But let's look at how people are dealing with this idea of climate change, and, you know, ending our civilization and causing an incredible chaos and a scary world. And let's see how people deal with this. And let's keep in mind the ego, and that it's not a good thing for us, and how the ego tries to separate and is not at one with everything. Now, I hope today we will maybe find out that to live in the spiritual realm in all our affairs, and to have this outlook, is the best way to live. And I think that if you adopt this, you will live and you will die with dignity, no matter what happens. So I want to look at the way people are dealing with this, that I see in the media and groups and things like that. Now, I think at the lowest level, I see these people that I guess you could call them survivalists, or they're called preppers. And I kind of looked at some of these people and their some websites and YouTube channels just briefly. And I think this is not the way that I want to go and live, even if it gets bad, as they say, and terrible things happen. And I see that as a very fearful, terrifying response to death, or an early death, or to hide away, to separate, and with generators and food and guns and all alone, or even on the other spectrum, having a underground, penthouse and food and everything to last you for a long time in New Zealand or something, if you're really rich. I don't think these are very attractive ways to face this. That is, to me, the lowest. That is an incredibly fearful, separated, egoic way, I think. Now the next, this is a little better way that people deal with it, is that, and you see this a lot, is that maybe it's like this quote I said earlier about it's the end of the world as we know it. And it's, you see this and people are telling you that it's the end of the world, and humanity is evil and it's getting what they deserve, or something along those lines. We deserve, we're greedy, and people are just not very good, and they're irresponsible, and they've destroyed the planet, and now they're going to pay for it. And usually people that give you this message, it's not their fault either. It's everybody's fault except theirs, I guess. And there are many people like that, and they may be unconsciously like that, but that's really what you're saying. And I don't agree with that, but I don't think that that's a way to be. And I hope that this channel will help people that are in that situation to not live that. Now, a better way probably of being is the way that I think most of the world is. That they don't know what to do. They don't pay attention, and they just go on with their lives. And they may not do anything about it. They just, they don't know. And in a way that I understand that, it's kind of it's a way of saying that I don't have, I'm just a person and I have very little power over the world and no influence, and there's nothing I can do. And I'm just going to live and grow and make as much money and have kids and do whatever I can, and what will be will be. And I guess I understand that too, but I think as we go on, you may not be able to live that way very much anymore. I think it's going to, this is going to continue. I think that we can all agree that there will be changes, and especially the developing countries, and are just going to continue to have problems that may get worse. It depends, though. Anyway, now those are ways that people deal with it, and I think that the best way to deal with this is to do what you can about it, But to have these spiritual ideas and concepts and in place to relieve you from the seriousness of it. At the same time, not creating fear and terror and within yourself and others, and being free and at peace. And that's what we're going to try to do. And that's what I think. And I think this poem by Rumi will explain that. So let's move on to Rumi's great poem. Okay, so this is Rumi, and like I said, a 13th century poem from a Sufi mystic that is very well known. And the name of this, I got this out of, well, Eckhart Tolle turned me onto this with one of his lectures. And I have this book called The World's Wisdom that I would suggest that if anybody ever sees that, to get it. It has excerpts from all the religions and other writings throughout the written history of our planet, and it's an incredible compilation, a nice book to have. But it had some Sufism in there, and I thought that the name of this was The Long Journey, but it might be The Ascending Soul. I've lost that book. I lost it in my travels. So let me read that to you, and I'm going to change a couple of words in it just to make neutral terms. That I'll go back and read it again and change it back for you. And then I'll try to put this on the screen so you can read along with it. But I think that, it just contemporizes it a little bit. Back then, some of the words were gender and things like that, that we don't look at things that way anymore. And really, this is about evolution of our planet, and then into the unknown and the cosmos, and about death in a way. And I think that you will see why it's not a scary thing. And before we just look at death and as such a horrible thing, right? I don't think anybody goes around saying that death is good. We want to stop it. It's just the worst thing that could possibly happen is for us to die young, die of a disease, die of an accident, of the species to die, of extinction to die, of species dying earlier than they should because of our living, and it's on and on and on. And this is simply bad, 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 no matter what. And that's what most of us all think. And we need to stop that. We don't want we don't want things to change. And anyway, and so I'm going to read this, and maybe we'll look at that a different way. So let's get into it. Now, this is Rumi, and this is the poem. I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was human. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die as human, to soar with blessed angels. But even from angelhood I must pass on. All except consciousness doth perish. When I have sacrificed my angel soul, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. Oh, let me not exist, for non-existence proclaims in organ tones, to him we shall return, or to consciousness we shall return. Now that's a beautiful poem, and it takes us from through evolution on this planet into the heavens and beyond angelhood. Now we'll look at this a little more closely. So you can see, why should I fear? When was I less by dying? So why is death bad? Why is it, why? But we believe that, absolutely. And we've rose from mineral to plant to animal to human. Well, it says man here. And then to angel, the next. But even there, you must die again. Even as an angel in heaven, you die again. Well, then what? Then where do you go? Everything dies except God, or consciousness, or the source, or the cosmos, or anything that you want to name, call it. But it's the unnameable. And he says, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. That means that we cannot conceive what is after death as human. It's inconceivable. And I don't know why you would think that it would be bad. We've been taught to think that. And this is when he talks about, oh, let me not exist. Now, what does that mean? Followed by, for non-existence proclaims in organ tones, to him we shall return, to the one we shall return. Meaning, proclaims in organ tones, in music, the universal language, in that we shall, for non-existence. So, oh, let me not exist. What does that mean? Let me not stand out. Let me not be tied to form of a human, and that's all there is. It's limiting, and I think that you can see that you wouldn't want to live forever as in this form. Now, I've heard people say they do, but I don't. I see the limitations of this form that we're in. And I just believe that, and I want to mention Taoism after this, how it ties into that. But to the source we shall return. And how do we relate to this climate change, climate collapse, and the fear and terror of it? That people are so lost in this that they are dissecting every aspect of the physical world and worrying and analyzing and trying to control every aspect of it, because it's absolutely terrible for any kind of changes that may happen. And this just leads to madness, I think. And I'll talk about that. There's no end to, but I'll talk about that again. I hope that this is not seem weird to you, but this is philosophy. So that's a great poem, and I find it quite comforting. A guy thought of this, centuries ago. The world was so different. And it's still powerful today. Now, I want to talk about studying spirituality, and I think that the more you do it, the more you read and study it, you'll find there's such commonalities of it, and it's different than religion. It's religious books are about you in a way. So you study all these things and you come to your own beliefs and understandings of it, and that you live by that. And I think that they're usually similar, but don't get trapped in religions that are rigid. Within us is, we all are Jesus, we all are the Buddha and Allah and all of it. They're not people to worship. We all have that in us. We are all that. And the understanding of that we can have. So I hope that maybe can free you up from some things. Now let's look. I want to talk a little bit about Taoism, and it kind of. So let's talk about dying again, and what is life. It's kind of what it says is that, okay, life is really birth and death, so that is both part of life, and it is a cycle of life, and it's not the end, I would think, and it can't be bad. I mean, as soon as you're born, you're destined to die. So if life is good, death can't be bad. And so this consciousness, I think we can feel it in ourselves, And that's kind of and so when you die, you return. That's what the Taoism is saying, that you return to the source, and that's nature or God, the source, nature, all these things. And it's just a returning to that. And that it's not to be feared. So I think this climate change thing is kind of symbolic. Like I said, the planet is going to die. The sun is going to burn out. I mean, we're going to go into, everything goes extinct. It's a matter of how fast. And we have to say, this is horrible. It's absolutely terrible. If things go extinct faster than we think they should. And, the Taoist, if you read it, they have very good sense of humor. And it's funny. And I could tell you all kinds of great stories from it. I would say to get the Tao Te Ching and the second book of the Tao by Stephen Mitchell. These are just great observations. And a lot of it, they talk about that we create polarities. So basically good and bad. What is good and bad? And we just cling to these, everything is, so we have to agree what's bad and what's good, and they just play with that so much, and it's very freeing, and it goes against the ego, really, and so it changes your perspective on, and I'm not saying to, do nothing and just drive ourselves into extinction. I'm not saying that. I'm saying to free up from it and quit. I see people suffering so bad, and they're working, and I see them on YouTube, and I can see the turmoil in them. That they're trying their hardest to get everything lined up in some way that they think everything should be. And we all do this, obviously. But it ain't never going to happen. For instance, let's say that climate change is fixed. We sequester carbon out of the atmosphere. Temperatures return to normal, whatever normal is, they don't heat up. And so the plants and everything adapt a little bit better, and they get a little relief. And then we discover fusion, and now we have free energy, unlimited free, carbon-free energy. Are all problems going to be solved? There will be another crisis. An unprecedented crisis will come up very quickly, every time. There's an old saying, and this is kind of the Taoist way of this good and bad thing, that within every success lies a failure. And within every failure lies a success. So things happen. And and we label them good and bad. And I'm just saying that this leads to a very rigid and scary way of living. And just look at this good and bad thing, and how everything's labeled good and bad. And without one, there isn't the other. And the Taoists, they break these things down. And it's a wonderful freedom. And so there's all this wisdom out there that many people know about, but many don't. And I think you look at the cultures, and they don't seem to be enlightened at all, and they seem scary places, and they're all very polarized. And I don't think it's a good way to live. Okay, that's the talk for today, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to have I'll have more of these. I love this stuff, and it's incredibly powerful and healthy, I think, for our minds and our spirits. And it's about educating ourselves and not getting lost in the world, lost in our minds, and just thinking and running around. And the smarter you are, the worse it is, really. And I just think that people they get lost, and there's no sense in it. And again, I'm not saying to not do anything. It's quite a world. I will leave you with that, and I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you for joining me. And I hope to see you next time on Living with Climate Change. Bye-bye.